Yes, it's okay with me.
Okay, very good. I don't think I ever got a chance to thank you for Being Time, which was just that was a great book.
Thank you. I also enjoyed your book, so we can be a mutual admiration society.
There you go. There you go. Can't have too many books on Genjo-Koan, I say.
No,
How are we doing, Beyond? Beyond is pushing all the. There we go.
Sorry. I'm trying to push all the buttons because I forgot this morning for the morning service. So now I'm trying to be on top of it. It's all good. It's all going.
Well, I guess we'll get started and see who shows up.
There's still 3 minutes left, so
Oh yeah, a couple of minutes.
yeah.
Okay. Well, we're just sitting here and schmoozing. Good to see so many friendly faces here. Hi, Tagon. Very good. How long did you study with Weitzman Roshi, Shinshu?
oh gosh, I don't know, 20 years, 25,
Oh,
something like that, 30. Long time.
I only got to meet him one time, very briefly, and if I had, my, of course, I love my teacher, but if I had a choice, I would have. Weitzman Roshi always struck me as the real deal.
Yeah, we really love Sojin Roshi and felt like he, was uh, definitely understood the Dharma and we wanted to grow up to be like him as Dharma teachers. So that was, it was a wonderful to study with him, and he lived to be 92.
Yeah.
So Sojin had a long, productive life. We just went up to Tassajara about 2 weeks ago, and there's a big hill, kind of a bench, and Suzuki Roshi's ashes are up there, and I think Katagiri Roshi, and so we added Sojin Roshi's
Oh, that's amazing.
ashes up there. He had all of his deshi. I think he had 32 deshi. So yeah, we all went up there and put his ashes underneath the stone that is his memorial site.
Who is the abbot at Berkeley now?
Linda Gallion.
I see. I see. I take it they're doing good.
Yeah, as near as I can tell, I never really practiced at Berkeley Zen Center, but they seem to be doing just fine.
Good, 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 good. Well, now, Beyond, do I have your permission to get things started? All
Yes.
right. Well, we're going to let me make a very brief introduction and say officially a hello and a welcome, and then we're going to sit Zazen just for a few minutes, and then I will turn things over to Shinshu for her enlightening talk. But our honored guest today, we are privileged to have as a visiting teacher the wonderful Shinshu Roberts. We were just discussing Shinshu is a Dharma heir of the legend Shojin Mel Weitzman, who was the abbot of Berkeley Zen Center. She, of course, is in the lineage of San Francisco Zen Center and is also an international Dharma teacher of the Japanese Soto Shu. Um, she, with her spouse, Jaku Kinst, is founded and is the teacher of the Ocean Gate Zen Center in Capitola, California, which I have to confess, I don't know where that is. But
It's right. It's if you know where Santa Cruz is, that's Capitola. It's like one
oh, okay.
street is Santa Cruz and the other street is Capitola. There are actually four towns that butt up against each other. So Santa Cruz will do.
I gotta confess, I don't know where that is either. I'm from Florida.
It's about midway down the coast in California.
Oh, okay. All right. But Shinshu is the author of two marvelous books. Her book from, I want to say a couple of years ago, but it's probably a little longer now, is a Being Time, which is a wonderful guide to Master Dogen's Uji Being Time, which I recommend to all. But her latest book, which we're going to hear about today, is on Master Dogen's Genjo-Koan. I think everyone's heard of that, Genjo-Koan. And it is called Meeting the Myriad Things. And I was hoping to finish the book before today, but I'm about 3/4 through, I have to say. But it is wonderful, and I highly recommend to all. Shinshu, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm gonna turn things over to you in a second, but right now we're gonna sit Zazen just for a moment. Beyond, do you have a bell? Can you ring us in just for a minute? We'll have a couple of minutes of Zazen just where you are. Lovely. I'm now going to turn everything over to Shinshu. I just want to mention that if anyone has a question for Shinshu, you can please email me during the talk or anytime after at Treeleaf, one word, at gmail.com, Treeleaf@gmail.com, and I will be sure to answer your question if we have time. Shinshu, thank you so much, and it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Shindo-san. And I want to thank you, formally, Genjo-Koan Roshi, for asking me. Thank you very much. And so what I'm going to give is basically it's my kind of book talk. Not kind of, it is my book talk on the Meeting the Myriad Things, and it's it's published by Shambhala Publications. You can buy it through Shambhala or Amazon. Just a little plug here, and also I've been told that the audio version is really good. So if you want to listen, if you like to listen to audio versions, supposedly people I know, I'm kind of old school, so I tend to read more rather than listen. But if that's what you like, I understand it's very good. So first of all, the book came about because I was teaching a class at Ocean Gate Zen Center, and as Jindo Roshi mentioned earlier, Ocean Gate Zen Center was founded by myself and my wife, Daijaku Kinst. And we already discussed where Capitola is. So, as you probably already know, Genjokoan is written in 1233. And by the way, so this talk takes about a half an hour or maybe 40 minutes. So just to give you a heads up about how long you are going to be a captive audience. Anyway, Genjo-Koan was written in 1233, and it's part of a larger group, larger text, which I'm sure you probably already know, called Shobogenzo, which means Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. And Dogen, as I'm sure you already know, was a 13th century founder of Soto Zen in Japan. Now, Genjo-Koan has been translated in lots of different ways. Meeting Myriad Things is how the publisher of my book decided to call it. The Realized Universe, the Realized Koan, Actualizing the Fundamental Point, and the Issue at Hand. So because there are so many different titles, I'm just going to call it Genjo-Koan. Generally, if I can, I'd like to call Dogen's fascicles by their Japanese name, in part because there are different English translations, and sometimes it's hard to know what's what. Okay, so Genjo-Koan was written as a letter to a lay student whose name was Yokoshu. So excuse my Japanese pronunciation. And not long after Dogen returned from China, and there's some thought that this guy may have been on the ship when Dogen came back from China. So you kind of imagine maybe the two of them late at night or sitting under the stars in the bow of the ship talking about the Dharma. So there's this sort of element about this, for me anyway, this image of how this text may have come about for Dogen. Now, most of Dogen's earliest writings, like Bendowa, Fukan Zazengi, are instructions on how to practice, very specific instructions about cultivating and expressing realized response. And Genjo-Koan, as one of his earliest texts, also falls into this category. So what Genjo-Koan is, I think, is a kind of primer on how to recognize the how of or what of realized action, what is it, and how it is that we recognize and enact that within ourselves. And so the resulting text is a kind of primer on this and how we can actualize it in our daily lives. Okay. Let's see. My view just switched from gallery to speaker, and I don't want to just look at myself, so I switched it back. Okay, so So this is Dogen's teaching that he's given us freely given us to help us realize our true nature. So if we could do what was in Genjo-Koan and truly understand what's in Genjo-Koan, it would allow us, our Buddha mind would come forward in all of our interactions. So he's telling us here how to be bodhisattvas, how to engage in the bodhisattva way. And as soon as we open up any text, but you're looking at Dogen and you realize that throughout time and space, he's alive for us right there and then in that moment. It's as if he's right there in the room with you, speaking to you about the nature of our practice. And so he's doing his best through the centuries. And I don't know what, of course, we don't know what Dogen's long vision for this was. But the reality is he's speaking through us down through the centuries about how to engage in beneficial action. So he's asking us as bodhisattvas to make our best action. And so that's the audience for this book. That's the audience for, it's the audience for my book, but it's the audience for Dogen. Dogen is speaking to us as people who've already committed ourselves and made that vow that we're going to engage in bodhisattva practice and that we're going to make our best effort to alleviate the suffering of ourselves and others. So my aim is to encourage our practice through the commentary, doing this commentary, and to contribute to a conversation. So this is a conversation. There are a lot of commentaries on Genjo-Koan, as you probably already know. So I feel like I'm just contributing to a many decades and centuries of conversations about how do we practice using Dogen Zenji's teachings. So it's a conversation about this. So, but ultimately, as practitioners, we want to use this as a way to, it's not an intellectual practice. Although in my introduction, I do talk about how I think we should study Dogen, because I think we have to be intellectually in the ballpark in order to understand what Dogen's saying. Because otherwise we make up stories about what we think he's saying based on what we already know. And Dogen's trying to teach us something that maybe we don't already know. So it's important to understand, try to understand what he's saying. So I spent some time in the introduction talking about how I think, at least for me, how I think we should study Dogen. Dogen seemed to consider Genjo-Koan so important that he always placed it as the #1 text in the compilations of the Shobogenzo that he did. The compilation that most of us read was put together later. I can't remember exactly when, by the Soto Shu. I think maybe in the 19th century. I'm not positive about this. It's in the introduction. So that's that 90 some odd fascicle one that many of us read, but that Dogen didn't put that together himself. His fascicle, I think the Shobogenzo that he did, I think is 70 fascicles. So again, I could be a little off on the numbers here. But anyway, he always put Genjo-Koan first. And two of his students, Kyogo and Zene, who wrote a commentary on Genjo-Koan, they said that, Genjo-Koan could be the beginning of every fascicle. It could be like Genjo-Koan, Uji being time, or it could be Genjo-Koan of washing the face, which if you have looked at the Shobogenzo, you know that washing the face is one of his fascicles. So it could be the Genjo-Koan of, he didn't write this fascicle, but the Genjo-Koan of washing dishes, or the Genjo-Koan of driving to work. So it was considered an extremely important fascicle. And so with that in mind, I think, all of the fascicles, that everything Dogen wrote is interesting and helpful to us for sure. But Genjo-Koan, I think, is particularly helpful. And I wrote this book primarily for Zen students. So the book, I think the book generally can be helpful to anybody. The Uji book is a little geekier in a way. I think the Uji book is much harder to enter into if you're not a Zen student. But I think this book is a little easier in that regard. But nevertheless, I wrote it not for a general audience, but for those of us who are practicing the way. So this is for us that we want to deepen our understanding of Dogen. So for that reason, I included a lot of quotes from Dogen. So almost always, if Dogen is talking about something in a fascicle, he talks about it later at some point in another text. My primary texts that I was looking at were Ehe Koroku and Shobogenzo. Sometimes Zuimanki, but mostly, and sometimes I can't remember the name of the text that he wrote about his meeting with Rujing in China. But so, for example, in Uji, he talks about Komyo, radiant light or luminous light, and he wrote a whole fascicle about that later on. So it's like if there's something you don't understand in Dogen, you might, in a fascicle, you might discover if you look through the rest of the Shobogenzo that there's an actual whole fascicle that he wrote about it. So that's the reason why I quote Dogen a lot, to try to clarify, to kind of clarify what he's talking about from a different source of his, and B, to let you know that this is a way to study Dogen. And just as a kind of side comment, you can get a PDF file of the Shobogenzo, and you can look up, you can cross-reference things. Now, the thing that's a little tricky about that is that translators are using different words. So what's really helpful is to get a PDF file of something like the most recent Shobogenzo, which is 8 volumes. And to actually, the Japanese is in there, and so you can actually cross-reference the Japanese characters. I don't speak Japanese, so this is possible to do even if you don't speak Japanese. Anyway, just a little sidelight. So the other thing I do in the book is I do a lot of footnotes because I want you to know my source material. Because if you want to study what I studied, you can go back and look at it and find it and study it. And also contemporary examples. So I try to come up with examples in everyday life that I think apply to the teaching that Dogen's presenting. Let's see. So this is, I think, is really important that we understand that Dogen is writing for us. He's writing for us, and how do we understand him in our everyday life? So that's what I'm trying to talk about in my examples. Okay, so what's actually in the book? And so in the introduction, I discuss when and where Genjo-Koan is written. I talk about what I consider to be what are, Dogen's formative experiences in his discussions with the head cook in Tenzo Kyokan. And I think those discussions are what answer Dogen's question. If we are all, this is a kind of paraphrase, but if we all are Buddha nature, what is the relationship to practice? I think that was a question that got answered for him in his discussions with the Tenzo. Dogen's use of sensory imagery, and as I mentioned earlier, ideas about how to study Dogen. This is followed by Shohaku Okumura's translation of Genjo-Koan, and then my commentary on the text. And so that's most of the book. But there are 4 appendices to this book. And the first one is the meaning and characteristics of a Dharma position, or abiding in a Dharma position. So a Dharma position is how reality manifests itself in the present moment as a particular person or a situation or a thing. It's Japanese juhoi, are abiding in a Dharma position. And it's a foundational model of how we understand practice. I think it's a foundational model of how Dogen understood the nature of how we how suchness is manifest as this very moment in relationship to our practice and in relationship to how we understand the nature of what's going on around us. So I think this understanding the characteristics of a Dharma position and understanding it in the relationship of practice is super important. And my breakdown of this comes from studying Uji, being time. So the actual concept of it seems to come from the Lotus Sutra, and I talk a little bit about the genesis of this term. And then the second appendix is a discussion of a translation of the word shusho, which means practice realization or practice verification. We often understand it to mean practice realization or practice enlightenment. Dogen said that that's one thing in Bendowa, but that more correct translation of it from the Japanese is practice verification. So I talked about what kind of the history of it and why of it's being translated as practice realization or practice enlightenment versus practice verification, and that scholars are now translating it as practice verification and what that means, like why verification. Maybe that's just kind of like a geeky thing I got into, but I wanted to know the answer to that question, so I kind of dived into that. The third appendix is an introduction to a commentary on Genjo-Koan written in medieval Japanese by two of Dogen's students, Kyogo and Sene, who I mentioned earlier. And this introduction is written by Reverend Zuiko Redding, who died last year, and she had been studying medieval Japanese. And so she wrote the introduction of this text, which is called O Kikigaki Sho, which is loosely translated as transcription and manuscript summary. So what this is Kyogo and Sene went through, and they wrote commentaries on the 70 fascicle. I keep saying 70. I'm not sure if it's 70 or 75 fascicle Shobogenzo that Dogen compiled. So they wrote commentaries on every one of those fascicles. This has not been translated into English. I'm not even sure it's been translated into contemporary Japanese. So Shohaku Okamura translated this text back in the 90s, and I ended up getting a copy of it. So I got in touch with Shohaku and said, can I use your translation and put it as an appendix to my book? And he said, yes, but you have to edit it. I said, well, I don't do Japanese, so all I could do was just like figure out if verb tenses were correct. So that's when I got in touch with Zuiko and said, would you edit this? And she said, yes. And so out of that came this introduction that she wrote. And she also is a colleague of Shohaku, so she was able to communicate back and forth with him about what she was doing. Anyway, he was generous and allowed me to publish this in the book. So this is the first time this has been published in English. And the cool thing about this is it's actually understandable. I don't know about you guys, but I read some things like some weird texts back in the 70s. There were esoteric texts. I remember one was called something like the flower of the yellow golden something or other. And it was absolutely incomprehensible. So the nice thing about this commentary by Dogen's students is it kind of makes sense. It does make sense. So this is really exciting to me that we can read something written by Dogen's students. Can you imagine how cool that is? I think that's really amazing. So to hear what they have to say about this fascicle, it'd be wonderful if somebody would translate all of the fascicles that they wrote commentaries on. But who's that? Some graduate student somewhere. I don't know that that's going to be happening anytime soon. But if any of you read medieval Japanese, there's a project for you that would be deeply appreciated by the Dharma world. Okay, so as I mentioned before, Dogen wrote for and he taught students that he assumed were already committed to awakening their Bodhi mind and following the Bodhisattva path. So this is really important because he assumed that we wanted to wake up and recognize and acknowledge our delusions, and that through this we would learn to actualize the Buddha nature. And I mentioned this because I realized in my book, I don't think I ever said that in my book. And so I just made that assumption about the people who were reading the book. So maybe there are some qualifiers I didn't add that I might do now. But I think that all of us, that is our goal in practice. So he based his teachings on this radical understanding in Buddhism that this Buddhist doctrine that all of us are fundamentally endowed with the mind of a Buddha, this mind of suchness, this we are not separate from things just as they are. So we have this innate capacity to become free of delusion and actualize realization. That's really wonderful. We don't have to do lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We're actually already have the capacity to awaken. And so actualizing realization is this ability to incorporate the needs of the totality of any situation we are in and respond skillfully. And that's my understanding of what enlightenment is, what enlightened action is. And one of my premises of my commentary is that we do this far more often than we think we do. That we have this very kind of exalted, idealized notion of what realized action is, and we don't credit ourselves with the amount of times that we do respond skillfully to a situation. And so sometimes, though, the how this gets enacted is gets a little messy. So I'm going to read for you now something out of the book. And so let's see. So this is chapter 3. And first I'm going to read what Dogen wrote in Genjo-Koan, and then I'm going to read, and then in the book, in this chapter, I do a commentary. And then at the end of the commentary, I give an example of how I think this works. Okay, so in the book, this is Dogen. Conveying oneself towards all things to carry out practice enlightenment is delusion. All things coming and carrying out practice enlightenment through the self is realization. Those who greatly realize delusion are Buddhas. Those who are greatly deluded in realization are living beings. Furthermore, there are those who attain realization beyond realization, and those who are deluded within delusion. When Buddhas are truly Buddhas, they don't need to perceive they are Buddhas. However, they are enlightened Buddhas, and they continue actualizing Buddhas. And reading this, I just want to add, kind of as a side note here, is that I try to go into, as much as I'm able to, I try to go into the Japanese of some of the important phrases in Genjo-Koan and how they can be understood in different what the words actually mean in the Japanese. And for this, I relied upon my friends who speak Japanese, who are Buddhist scholars. Carl Bluefield was helpful to me, and also Paula Arai, who's a Buddhist scholar and teacher. Okay, so here's the example that I gave about that in the book. So this is the book. Here is an example from my life, which I think sums up the complexity and unfolding of this kind of interbeing of practice realization. I'm at my local grocery store the day before Thanksgiving. The express line is not open. There are only a few clerks, and the line is very long, maybe 20 people. I'm about 4 people from the back, and I have 2 items. The clerk from the coffee bar comes over to my area of the line and points to 4 of us who have few items and says, "Come over to the coffee register, I'll check you out." We all peel off and head to the coffee bar register. I'm the last in line. A man rushes up behind me and says in a whiny voice, "What about me? I was ahead of you." I reply, "Don't complain, just go ahead of me," which he does. The woman in front of him, having heard our exchange, also lets him go in front of her. Now he's in the front of the line. I could see the delusion of the guy who complained. He thought he'd been slighted when he hadn't. The clerk didn't see him. Nevertheless, his delusion annoyed my delusion, so I said, "Don't complain." I realized my delusion because "don't complain" was unnecessary and judgmental, and I said it, but I said it nevertheless. Although I was not perfect, I was good enough. I let him go ahead of me, although somewhat begrudgingly. Clearly, my actions were not completely awakened. They were in the ballpark, but did not have the quality Dogen later characterizes as realization beyond realization. My response was spontaneous, but not necessarily skillful. Often in practice, we don't see what we are doing is off the mark. The first thing we have to do is see that. What do we see? We see that we are only perceiving our situation from our own perspective. We are carrying the self forward. Feeling irritated, I characterize the other person as perceiving himself as a victim. Responding without anything extra would have been to say, "Please go ahead," without the judgmental comment or thought on my part. It is my observation that the person Dogen is calling Buddha and the person he's calling sentient being, as well as the times of their realization or delusion, are fluid. Very likely, the guy who complained does not always complain. This complaining is empty of inherent existence. In a different scenario, surely he is the one responding with his Buddha mind. Consequently, we go back and forth with varying degrees of success. Perhaps when the woman ahead of me heard our exchange and said, "Please go ahead of me," her Buddha was actualized. Maybe it was already actualized and she immediately said, "Go ahead." But her ability to say, "Go ahead of me," was still contingent upon me saying, "Go ahead." Me saying, "Go ahead," was dependent upon the guy's complaint, and so on back through the causal chain of events. In our stumbling manner, we were Buddhas actualizing each other. Each of us has affected the outcome of this situation, and in some hidden way carried forward the practice of no self by acknowledging the needs of one another. By doing so, we may be Buddhas who continue actualizing Buddhas, although we had no intention of doing so or even defining our actions in such a way. Sometimes a person engages realization beyond realization, while at other times we activate being deluded within delusion. Sometimes a person functions as a bodhisattva in both states. Sometimes we go back and forth or do both simultaneously. These states are not oppositional. They are situational and informed by our level of awareness. Both delusion and realization are our actual state. We swim in both. Good swimmers, that is, bodhisattvas, swim effortlessly without thought while totally immersed in the delusional samsaric world. Sometimes we greatly realize delusion, and sometimes we are greatly deluded in realization. And sometimes we facilitate the practice of others as we continue to actualize Buddhas, resulting in both self and other co-functioning in realized activity. So that's the example that I give at the grocery store of what I consider to be this enactment of realizing delusion and also the various things that Dogen says in here. Okay, so that's one thing. By the way, the quotes get shorter as I go along, so I'm trying not to bore you to death. I think hearing other people reading something is difficult. All right. So in another section of Genjo-Koan, Dogen wrote about how we experience the self as an independent being by comparing our situation, our Dharma position, as firewood and ash. So I'm sure you guys, if you're familiar with Genjo-Koan, there's like one of the most famous sections here. Dogen says, we should know that firewood dwells in the Dharma position of firewood and has its own before and after. Although before and after exist, past and future are cut off. Ash stays in the position of ash with its own before and after. So this is an example of one of the ways of talking about a section of a Dharma position, which is what I talk about in the appendix. But the example I give is this. And by the way, I think we get confused about what it means to talk about no self. No self just means no inherently existing self, which means, of course, that we are impermanence, right? It's like we're not always the same. We're not fixed. We're in this context of interrelating totality of reality itself manifesting within the context of this particularity or independent position, Dharma position, called this person or this cup or this situation or whatever. So I think sometimes we get confused about that. So that's what part of what I'm talking about here in my example. I wrote, your life is uniquely your life. This particularity called you has its own experiences, memories, desires, futures, and so on that have created an original personality with specific ideas and ways of seeing the world. In this way, we have a unique before and after. Our past experiences and our future life are particular to us while being part of the whole of creation. But if we mistake this independent aspect as permanent or as a permanent or a fixed self, we will limit our ability to engage our awakened mind. Because we are talking about how something exists in the present moment, not how it might have been in a previous Dharma position, Dogen writes, past and future are cut off. Each Dharma position is completely expressed within this moment's arising. This is manifesting total function. From this perspective, by the way, so total function, is Zenki, which he wrote a whole fascicle about. So anyway, this is manifesting total function. From this perspective, our perceptions of past experiences and our desire for future events are dropped in service of a more flexible attitude towards our present experience. So from this perspective, our perceptions of past experiences and our desire for future events are dropped in service of a more flexible attitude toward our present experience. In this way, we cut off our attachment to experiences and past and future desires. It is only from this perspective that we can meet others with an open mind and a freed heart. We can become curious about that person and not walled off from them because we have placed them in some ideological box. Nor do we place ourselves in a prison of karmic shackles. We are not trapped in a karmic cycle of self-identity. Refusing to internalize self-labeling such as I'm stupid or I'm the smartest person in the room frees us to redefine our experience. If a Dharma position did not have an independent aspect, this would not be possible. Because of a being times particularity, we can cut ourselves loose from habitual reification of the self and create a path of transformation and freedom from suffering. So that because of a being times particularity, we can cut ourselves loose from habitual reification of the self and create a path of transformation and freedom from suffering. If you did not have an independent aspect, a particular independent personality, if you will, you could not free oneself from delusion because there would be no there. So there's that we are, we are individual, independent Dharma positions, while simultaneously being completely part of, not separate from, the totality of all of reality functioning. Okay, back to the book. Furthermore, it is only in the present that we can become liberated through expressing realized action. We must be aware of our delusion and confident in our ability to do something different. A person's present manifestation, or a person's experience of self, does not negate the past or future of that self or dharma, nor does it deny causally created karmic response and effect. Rather, it contextualizes them as factors or influences that do not necessarily dictate our response at this time. In each moment, we are free to respond to what is arising. This happens, according to Buddhist teaching, by fully realizing the impermanence of oneself and thereby freeing oneself from karmically conditioned, unworkable, and unskillful actions. So that's my commentary about that. And I'll just say that, I really like to talk about the things that we do that are delusional as unworkable and unskillful, because then we don't get into this trap of going, I'm bad and I'm good and I'm this terrible, horrible person. It's not like that. It's a problem, right? That we can work on through practice. And so if we say, this thing that I did is not very workable, or the thing that I did was really unskillful. So it becomes like, how can I become skillful? How can I engage in more workable activity? So that's like, I think a much better way to talk about it than, boy, I'm a real idiot, or some kind of really negative self-talk. Same thing for the other person, right? To remember that other people make mistakes too. And yeah. So the state of being cut off here that Dogen talks about, firewood dwelling, the Dharma position of firewood, and then that past and future are cut off, is this place of freedom in which we have this flexibility to change and respond to what's actually happening at the time. Okay, another teaching that's key to understanding Dogen's view of the world is to listen to our world. That what he calls, what we hear in this way of listening, he calls inexhaustible virtues of the myriad things of the world. So in Genjo-Koan, let's see this here. Okay, so this first part is what Dogen wrote in Genjo-Koan. He wrote, when we listen to the reality of myriad things, we must know that there are inexhaustible virtues in both ocean and mountains, and there are many other worlds in the four directions. This is true not only in the external world, but also right under our feet or within a single drop of water. So I just want to add as a sidelight here is an example of Shohaku translates the word here as the Japanese word, which escapes me at the moment. Let me see if I can find it here. Jinda, maybe you can help me. What's the Japanese word for characteristics or virtue?
Dotoku?
Yeah, kotoku. So kotoku can be translated as virtue or characteristics. That's really different in English, the idea of virtue versus the idea of characteristics. Shohaku translates it as characteristics. I like better virtue, and so I talk about this in my commentary about these two different translations of the word. So here I changed, for the purposes of this book reading, I changed his hero characteristics. But I'm doing virtues. When we listen to the reality of myriad things, we must know that there are inexhaustible virtues in both ocean and mountains, and there are many worlds in the four directions. This is true not only in the external world, but also right under our feet or within a single drop of water. So that's what Dogen wrote in Genjo-Koan. In my commentary, I wrote, quote, when we listen to the reality of myriad things, quoting Dogen, we can intuit the unfathomable complexity and completeness of our world. A realized response begins with listening. If our minds are occupied with ideas about what each thing, person, or situation is, regardless of the actual experience, we will never find the point of pure response that goes beyond this or that. We must listen to enact true practice. In Mujo Seppo, insentient beings speak Dharma, that's a fast school in the Shobogenzo, Dogen teaches that hearing the voices of this myriad world is paramount to our understanding. Okay, so now I'm quoting Dogen. Hearing Dharma is not limited to ear sense and ear consciousness. You hear Dharma with complete power, complete mind, complete body. You can hear Dharma with body first and mind last. Such ways of hearing the Dharma are all effective. Don't think that you are not benefiting by hearing the Dharma if it does not reach your mind consciousness. Effacing mind, dropping body, you hear the Dharma and see the result. With no mind and no body, you should hear Dharma and benefit from it. Experiencing such moments is how all Buddhas and ancestors become Buddhas and attain ancestorhood. Okay, so that's the quote from Dogen. And then I write, this is stopping and actively listening to our life. And then a drop of water is so ephemeral that it appears and disappears in a matter of seconds or minutes. Yet each completely holds the totality of the moon's reflection or the Dharma's continuous practice. We know from modern microbiology that there really are worlds in a drop of water. If we deeply listen with our body, heart, and mind, not just with our ears, we begin to hear the myriad teachings of our life's companions. We hear the voices of the ocean and a small drop of water. Zen teacher Nishiyari Bokusan brings us back to our immediate practice when he writes, vastness without limitation is immediately underfoot. You may think a great ocean is vast and distant, but it is no other than the cup of tea you are drinking right now. And that's the end of the quote. One of Dogen's primary teachings is that we live in a world of vast interconnected networks, all functioning together to manifest what we experience as solid form. Furthermore, this network or working of reality is essentially an altruistic endeavor. Virtue is the essential goodness of total function. Seeing this, we relate to such vastness in the immediacy of each moment's arising in our present circumstances, time, or Dharma position. Vital to this mandala of activity is our own particular participation as practitioners of the Bodhisattva ideal. The logic of how a Bodhisattva manifests Buddha nature is Dogen's teachings throughout all of his writing. Nishiyari reminds us that following the Dharma as far as our eye of study and practice can see is dependent upon knowing that vastness without limitation is immediately underfoot. Recalling this teaching opens our eyes to looking, listening more closely than we had before, with more curiosity and generosity. This looking, listening, seeing is a cup of tea you are drinking right now, and it is the drop of dew on the grass outside your front door. It is bubbles in your sink and troubles that greet you. Each instant is a sutra written as mountains and oceans, teacups and problems. These are the sutras of our immediate experience, of the many other worlds in the four directions. It is also the song of our life, as it is right under our feet or within the smallest drop of water. A single drop of water, mountains, oceans, a teacup, washing your clothes, eating dinner, arguing over abortion, everything, every situation and activity of daily life should be approached as Buddha Dharma. When we can hear the inexhaustible great virtue of our life, then our practice will come forth as a realized practice. Sutras are the wisdom of those who came before us, and sutras are being written every day. Dogen teaches that each moment of our life is a sutra. It is sacred, mundane, absolute relative, practice realization, nothing special, the whole ball of wax. It's all happening right now, right here, under our noses. Okay, so those are examples from my book. I'm hoping in this commentary to encourage our practice so that we can more better, that we can, contribute to this ongoing conversation that we have with each other and with Dogen and with all the teachers in the past and the present, and in the future, we can contribute to that conversation about how it is that we practice, how we awaken our minds, and how we learn. And of course, for us as Soto Zen practitioners, we do this by trying to enact Dogen's way. Okay, thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Shinshu. Also, excuse the one-handed gasho. The cat has my other hand here. If anyone has a question for Shinshu, we have 2 pages of folks, so I'm going to flip back and forth, but just wave your hand like crazy if you have a question, and I'll try to get as many folks as possible. And we have some folks watching at home. If you send me an email at jundotreeleaf@gmail.com, jundotreeleaf@gmail, I will try to ask any questions. Anybody have any question? I guess as the host, I get first prerogative. I guess I'm going to. The question I want to ask you, if I may, is the Kogyo and Sene commentary is very hard to find even in modern Japanese, and and only sections have been translated into English, and it's really marvelous that you have included that for Genjo-Koan. Was there anything, they were students of Dogen, so it's actually reading some people who studied with Dogen, what they have to say. Was there anything in there that surprised you, or their interpretation was not what you were expecting about Genjo-Koan?
Well, one of the things, I don't know if this, that I found interesting about it is their tendency was to talk about everything from a non-dual point of view. So, for example, in Genjo-Koan, when Dogen says to carry the self forward is delusion, to allow myriad things come and meet you is realization. That's more Kaz Tanahashi's translation, but they say in there, if you, and I talk about this in the book, if you understand it the way I understand it, which is, if you're carrying forward your own agenda, that's a problem. And if you allow the totality of the situation to meet you, that's a realized response. For them, that is and that's kind of a relative understanding of that passage. For them, they feel, I can't remember whether it was Sene or Kyogo, they say, no, that's the wrong understanding of this passage. You should understand it from a non-dual, not relative point of view. Personally, I feel like for us as practitioners, we should understand it as a relative point of view. If we try to make it into something non-dual, then at that point, I think we can kind of maybe rationalize poor behavior. So that was kind of like, well, that's interesting. They're trying to turn everything into this kind of, non-dual understanding. So, I think they definitely have their own point of view, the two of them. It's not they're not like just regurgitating uh Dogen in a real straightforward way. I mean, maybe that's how Dogen meant that in a non-dual way. But reading a lot of Dogen, it just seems like he's also very interested in this very practical way of how do we engage, with our present circumstances. So that was one thing about what they wrote. The other thing that surprised me was that it was understandable, um, as I said earlier. And there are sections of it which any place, there are places where they use phrases that are, I think, are kind of obscure and hard to understand. And so in my commentary, I actually talk about what that is. Like, because Zuiko, when they did the translation, there are no footnotes to the translation, which in a way is unfortunate, because there are some uh, Japanese expressions which we do in the book. The characters are shown and the romaji for the characters are there. So if you can read Japanese, you know what the actual word was in Japanese. But in the book, if I think there's something that's obscure, that's difficult to understand, that's a kind of technical term, I will say what I think, what my understanding of that is, so that helps understand the commentary. Does that make sense? Kind of garbled here, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Wave your hands. Oh,
Sure.
okay, I take it that was a question. Or Onki. That was about? No question?
So, are the rest of you totally stupefied? No thoughts at all about this?
Oh, Taegan.
So I think maybe it's just my novice nature in Japanese, but I've been struggling a lot with Jijuyu Zanmai in Bendoa. And I know on page 64 you have Jisho Zanmai, and it's a similar sounding word and a similar sounding thing, but I was wondering on your perspective of the relation of those two terms.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Oh.
Jenna, can you answer that question?
It's all you tonight, Shinshu. I'm off.
Okay. Well, tell me what the two words mean.
Okay, so Jisho Zanmai is the samadhi is the experience of self.
Okay.
And Juju Zanmai is the translation I've read is like the self-actualizing self, I think. It's what I think it's what we practice when we do Shingon Tazo, but I don't know. So that's why I was curious to see what your thoughts were.
Okay, here's what I would hear. Okay, the first one is samadhi of the experience of self. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here would be my guess. Okay, based on what I know about Dogen. The samadhi of the experience of self, and self-actualizing self, essentially, I would think were the same thing, which is this. I think samadhi refers to the way in which we, as Kanzai used to say, disporting oneself, the way in which we can actually experience the nature of reality, which of course is always manifesting itself, not separate from the self, but this experience of reality itself in a way in which we kind of surf. It is an effortless way in which we are able to engage the nature of our experience with self and others. That self is not different than that samadhi. That self is, when the self actualizes the self, is the actualization of the samadhi of the experiencing the self. So it's kind of like the self's the self, but the self and selfing the self is still selfing the samadhi of the experience of suchness itself, suching itself. So there is no difference between those things, except for the fact that we also, from the Dharma position, there is a Dharma position called self, and there's a Dharma position called cup or other or whatever separate from that. Each has its own particularity. None is sometimes, well, I was going to say all are sameness on a certain level, although in different situations there is the vertical and the horizontal relationship. But yeah, does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Shinshu. I'm sorry I didn't jump in there, but I want to let you do all the hard work tonight.
That's
So-
all right. I can hang myself. Okay.
Shinkon, Shinkon is one of our priests.
Uh, Thank you for being here. It's great to see you. I've met you before at the Berkeley Zen Center, and I was a former student of Karen Dakota's.
Okay.
But my question is, and it's always with how we talk in Zen and how we're teaching, and especially when we write. And is if I understood and what you read about what you wrote, how does this manifest in our lives outside of the Zen institutional walls? I mean, to break this down in everyday language for ourselves.
That's what I'm trying to do when I give the example, for example, being in the grocery store.
Yeah,
So I think that if we I mean, hey, we're Zen students, right? So it means that we're using the language in the context of a particular school of Buddhism to discuss with ourselves and others using a particular vocabulary what it is to be a human being in this world and how we, engage this world through the self, because there is no other way we can engage the world except through the self, right?
yeah,
I mean, we're in a body. We have certain perceptual apparatus. So it means that, how do we do that? And I think that part of that is through vow. So, I say my vow is your vow can't be something like save all beings. That's entirely too amorphous. Vow has to be something in relationship to maybe something you need to work on or whatever it is. So let's say your vow is, I vow to be more patient. So you take that vow into your world, right? And you create a space in order for you to recall and remember and enact that vow, even though it's hard, because practice is hard. Practice is not easy. If it were easy, why would we? I mean, we wouldn't need to do it. So it's like it's hard to be patient if you're an impatient person. And that's where it starts to, that's where it manifests in our daily lives. But of course, within the context of that, we're using, as I said just a minute ago, that particular vocabulary. And it doesn't mean that, like it could be, we could be doing exactly the same thing that a person who identifies as Jewish, or a person who identifies as Muslim or Christian or an atheist or agnostic or whatever it is. No one has a corner on the market of enacting the precepts. No one has a corner on the market of engaging in skillful action. So it's just a matter of what is it that speaks to you as an individual. What teaching, or non-teaching or whatever it is that can help us do that. Usually, I think we need to do it within the context of a structure, because if we just make it up ourselves, then we tend to make it up in a way where we only do the parts that feel good and we don't do the parts that don't feel good.
right.
And the parts that don't feel good are really the parts we need to work on. So that's where we get into, when we get into these structures, we get into particular ways of talking about it. Shingon, I don't know, is that kind of where you're talking about here?
Yes, because if I'm talking with another Zen student or like other people that I know that are pastors and rabbis, academics, and everything, when we do the crosstalk or whatever, they don't understand Zen speak. Because when we start, if I start saying how things are within one another, they also gloss over, especially
Well,
if
we
I'm
don't
hearing.
understand their speak either.
Right. Well, I I have a lot of training within certain aspect of that. So my thing always is trying to how can I relate to other people in a concrete way with what we do, and
Yeah,
this helps.
so that's what Dogen's saying.
Yeah.
To carry the self forward, to insist upon your vocabulary,
Right.
for example, is not productive.
Mhm.
So to allow myriad things to meet us is this way in which we actually meet people. And if you're both religious types or whatever, then you're going to say, well, could you define that for me and tell
Yeah.
me what it means? And I'll tell you what this means, and we'll see whether or not they mean the same thing. And if they don't, well, you know, that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
But if that person is not doing that, then you say, well, how can I actually meet this person? You know, and in our culture right now, we're in a space of I don't want to meet this person.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in the space of I'm right and they're wrong, and that's not helpful. You know, we what's more productive is being in a space to be curious and not threatened. You know, if somebody doesn't agree with me about something, you know, for example, if somebody thinks that a woman should spend all their time at home and have babies and not, you know, have an opinion about anything, needless to say that might rub me the wrong way. But in order to have an actually engaged conversation, I have to be open to that and listen to that and try to figure out a way to maybe even we just end up with I agree to disagree. And that's fine. All right. So yeah,
Well,
that's our practice. That's what brings it down to our daily lives.
thank you very much. That's what I always like gathering these perspectives that helps me out. Thank you.
Great.
I'm going to drop in one question from someone at home who by email, Hokan. I thank you very much for the wonderful talk. I am enjoying the book. What did you mean that practice verification is not practice enlightenment? And you also used, I know, practice realization. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by that, Hoku, are you the guy in the black sweatshirt with the Roxu on? No, that's a different
Oh,
person.
this was from home. That was
Okay.
someone.
First of all, I'm just saying that Shusho has been translated as practice realization or practice enlightenment, but the more technical and correct translation from the Japanese is verification. And so, usually the way I talked about it as practice realization is we do not practice to get enlightened. Practice is an expression of realized action in and of itself. So Dogen says in Bendowa, they're not different. Practice is not different from realization. I talk about it in the appendix. This comes from something that D.T. Suzuki was doing and da 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 da. So verification or proof is a more correct translation. I think it's a more difficult translation in a way, because with that translation, we may ask the question, who or what is verifying, right? Practice verification. Or I asked Carl Bluefield about this one time because a lot of scholars translate Shusho as practice and verification, because that's the more correct way from the Japanese. But in Bendowa, Dogen makes really clear that he's using this as a hyphenated word in English. So for us in English. So yeah, verification is harder because of the question of who is being verified or what is verifying. And then we get into this non-duality of the Dharma verifying the Dharma, or what I was talking with Tegan, right, earlier about the self actualizing the self. Then we get into that area of it's not about something verifying something, but this mutual this mutual reciprocity between the activity of practice and Dharma verifying Dharma, or self realizing self. And then we get into that area, which actually is probably, I think both can be definitely describing the nature of Dogen's understanding, but probably the verification side is probably more accurate in the way he would parse something like that in talking about that. I hope that helps.
I like it. I say when you practice, the proof is in the pudding. So that's,
Yes.
yeah, verification. Okay, folks, wave your hands. Good. Touching your ear, you're going to get called out. It's like an auction here. Okay. Ms. Zolas.
To turn on my mic. Thank
There
you
you
so
are.
much for this talk. Well, I think it's really helped me realize something. And that is when you gave your example of the person in line who said, "Don't complain," and then someone in front. It really hit me like a rock because after I decided to become a student of Buddhism, I also decided to go back to church, and the reason is that the people there are really good people, and they have a lot of the same ideas, maybe in different form. And I thought, well, that would be really good because some of my friends are over there. But there are various things that I don't really like about the church. So I'm very uncomfortable going there because of my position of maybe trying to change somebody else instead of myself. And my example is that we were going to have a service, and this woman walked up and said, "Can I have your chair because I'm participating in the service?" And I didn't even think before I reacted. I said, "No, because I'm doing communion." And she was very sweet about it, but I feel that I know that wasn't really very skillful of me, but my basic instincts, how do you change your basic instincts? I feel like I understand what you're saying, but actually, do I really understand? And my whole thing after that, I was quite upset with myself. And then I thought, well, it's a good idea if I just don't go back to church anymore. I won't have this problem. But I get from what you're saying that it's not that I shouldn't go back to church anymore. It's that I should be more skillful when I'm with people, and I should take a lower position than someone else. And
Well, I
don't get
think, okay,
extra
so
mad.
I think you should go back because it's
Mhm.
a great practice place, right?
That's
Because
kind of
it's
what I'm
pushing your
getting.
butt. So it's a good thing, in that way. And it doesn't sound like it's unwholesome. It's not like a situation where you're going to, be harmed in some way. It's just a situation where you're actually having to use your Buddhist intelligence and work with your skillful means. Um, and you just said something else just a minute, just right at the very end of that. Do you remember what you said at the very end?
That I wasn't skillful,
No,
or
I can't remember what it was. Oh, damn.
How to
Um,
change the natural intentions?
Well, okay, well, I'll talk about that. That's not what I was thinking of. But anyway, how do we change? Well, first of all, we have to figure out what it is that we're doing that is not skillful. And that's why Dogen says in Genjo-Koan, something like, bodhisattvas are aware of their delusion. They are awakened to delusion. So first of all, we have to figure out what's not very workable. And that's why we have all these things like the precepts and the paramitas and all of these lists of things so that we can like look at that and say, and I'll just say, Carolyn, I'll just say, and maybe in that situation, you weren't as generous as you could have been. Okay. So we'll just say generosity. And so, how do we cultivate generosity? So maybe the way we do that is that we say to ourselves, okay, I really want to be more generous, and I don't want to be knee jerk about when I'm unskillful, because it sounds like what happened was you were like, you just had an automatic response, right?
Yes.
But this is my chair. I'm sitting in it. You can't have it. And
That's what disturbed me was that
and you
automatic
can't have it
response.
because, and this is what you said earlier at the very end, because my position is higher than yours, right? I think that's what you said. And so it's like, well, no, it doesn't work that way. It's like, if you want to create more generosity or have more patience or whatever it is, first you have to see what you're doing that's not working. Then you should make a vow to yourself, I'm going to work on this thing. And every chance you have to work on that thing, wake up to it and work on it, so that it's kind of like going to the gym and starting with, a 2-pound weight and then getting up to the 150 pounds. It's like, don't pick something that's super hard. Do something that is easier and work up to the hard stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
keep
Absolutely.
going back to church, because it sounds like it's a great place for you to practice.
It really is, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, what a gift. Think of it as a gift, not as it's like this horrible thing. It's like you're being given a gift in that situation because it's pushing your buttons. Like, it sounds like you're also like going, well, I think you mentioned something like, maybe how can I change other people? Don't try to change them. They're doing their own thing. And if you think about it, we all do like I said earlier, it's like, there are many, many, many different kinds of Christianity, just like there are many, many different kinds of Buddhism. As human beings, we need to problem solve. As human beings, we need a certain kind of mythos about the nature of the world. I think that seems to be borne out looking at history. And so consequently, we have these different systems for how we look at the nature of how reality functions. One system is called Christianity. One system is called Buddhism. It's like I'm Buddhist, so I believe my system. I think this system is, actually an accurate reflection of reality. I'm Buddhist. I don't believe that there is an overarching entity called God that's looking down and making decisions about things. But other people believe that. Other people think that that's true. And it functions in their life in a wholesome way. It can also function in an unwholesome way. But Buddhism can function in an unwholesome way too. So we don't have the market on wholesomeness. So it's like, I think we need to honor each person's way that they are trying to describe the nature of reality to themselves in a way that really helps them better function in the world. And ideally that we better function in the world in a way that's skillful, right? And that creates generosity and spaciousness and skillful means and all of those words that we use in Buddhism. So I wouldn't try to change anybody who's Christian. I just hope that, and if you're going to the church, it sounds like because there's something there for you that also augments and helps your practice as a Buddhist.
Well, yes, I think
You said
definitely
my
there
friends
is.
are there.
Yeah.
right? Your
I
friends
do.
are there. That's pretty sweet. Nothing
I
wrong
do,
with
but
that.
I'm not. I don't. I just, it's just kind of frustrating sometimes to be me. It's frustrating to find out how unskillful I am.
Well,
And
of course, we all hate to find out how unskillful we are. I mean, it's yucky. It's like you go home and you say, "Ooh, I did that again," you know. So we just have to keep working at it. You just keep
yeah,
working at it. Be firm with yourself, but not abusive, Be firm with yourself and remember your vow, but you don't have to beat yourself up because we're really just trying to do the best that we can do and just, go back into the situation and do the best you can do. That's it.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's very
Thank
helpful.
you.
Anyone else? Chico.
Well, I appreciate the concept of everything existing in a Dharma position. I think I've also heard it referred to as a Dharma state.
Right.
And if the implication there is that we're approaching each situation as a teaching moment, then I think it's an opportunity to see that the non-dualism, in the example of the grocery store, I think it can be seen as, what does this whole moment need? What does the situation need? Not what do I need in relation to, less about how kind can I be to someone, and what are my reasons for being kind, but given this line and the weight and the whole situation, how can I, be kind of a steward of the moment? Is how I interpreted it.
Yeah, I think that's good. Um, here's the caveat, which is probably not what you're thinking about, but here's the caveat and kind of what I was mentioning before about how Dogen was writing for practitioners, people who are already doing this, is that it is ideal that we do what is absolutely the most skillful thing in any given moment with the totality of the moment. And that should not include putting oneself into an abusive relationship or something that is harmful, right? That's not what you're saying, Chico, but I'm like, just want to reiterate that sometimes we can get caught up in this idea that somehow we have to do things that are somehow meeting the moment, that is inclusive. It's okay to set boundaries. We can set boundaries, but setting boundaries ideally is done in a skillful way. It doesn't need to be punitive. It needs to be skillful. Um, but I completely agree with what you're saying. Yeah, it's like our ideally our job is in our bodhisattva practice is to be able to suss out a situation and ask ourselves, what's the most helpful thing to do here. So, for example, the example I use in the Uji book is, when we go to a meeting with at work and we don't like one of our coworkers, and so consequently we think everything they say is really stupid and unhelpful, and we go to a meeting with them and they're always the person who talks forever and we're like want to just strangle them, and so we start playing games on our phone. But anyway, it's like the how so how can we go into that situation uh, with an open mind and with a kind of generosity that maybe this person might actually come up with a good idea. And if we're not open and willing to actually be present for the totality of the situation, which means hearing this person that we don't want to hear, we may we may totally miss what's happening, you know? And so that skillful response on our part is a willingness to be patient and generous and actually presence ourselves for what's happening, even though we're bored or annoyed or whatever it is that's going on for us. And that, that's that kind of practice that we're being asked to do. That can be really a hard practice. So yeah, what you're saying. Thank you.
I think we are coming about to the end of our allotted time, so I'm going to take maybe one more question. Anybody has a pressing question, really something? Our folks from Ukraine left. Hoku always asked me the hard questions. I was hoping he'd put him to Shinshu tonight, but any last? Hoku, you always ask me the hard questions. Don't you want to get a second opinion tonight? No, not tonight. Okay. Anyone else before we go?
Save it for Jundas-san later.
Okay, then I'm going to say thank you, Shinshu. I just wanted to say the reason I'm only 3/4 through your book is it's not a book that you just rush through. I mean, it's easy to read, but it's rich. So every time I get like 3, 4 pages, I get to this paragraph, and I fall into it, and you just put the book down, and you just be with that for a while. You just don't go page after page. It's really a book to savor slowly. So thank you so much. Uh, it's a really marvelous addition to our Dogen library, and thank you so much. And please, I hope you know you always have friends here. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate having a chance to do this. Jundas-san, thank you for staying up so late.
Okay, and all right, I'm going to say thank you all. We usually chant our way out, but tonight I'm going to let everybody. Well, Bion, you want to? I'm going to let everybody chant on their own tonight because the hour is growing late. So
Okay.
see
Okay.
you all later. Thank you so much. Bye
Good
bye.
night. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thanks, Shinshu.
You're welcome.
More buttons, more buttons.